Are you worried that you'll step up to your next presentation and the audience just won't like you? To make sure that doesn't happen, I'm going to share 5 critical presenting mistakes that make you extremely unlikable, and I'll show you how to fix them. Plus, I'll show you how to avoid the most overlooked mistake that can make you incredibly unlikable even if you have the best intentions. Hi, I'm Nils Vinya, and over the last 12 years, I've helped people boost their visibility, amplify their expertise, and thrust their careers to new heights through the creation and delivery of extraordinary presentations. Let's jump in and explore mistake number 1. I had a friend once, many years ago, who lived this first mistake to a T all the time, not just when he was presenting. One day we were with a group and he made a joke, which I didn't hear clearly, and I didn't get it right away. So I asked him to clarify, and he made the assumption that because I asked for clarification, that I didn't get the joke. And here's how he responded. Well, you wouldn't understand. It's a different kind of humor. Now that stung, and that one interaction with him forever changed our relationship. He was extremely unlikable. Now this is what I call the ivory tower mistake. And it happens when a presenter talks down to his or her audience or makes them feel inferior. This can happen by using condescending language or a tone that suggests the presenter is better than the audience. Now, the presenter might assume that their audience lacks the knowledge or expertise on the topic, even though they might be highly experienced professionals. And the key downfall here is when presenters fail to acknowledge their audience's perspectives and experiences, making them feel unheard and unvalued, just like my friend did to me. So to avoid the ivory tower mistake, the key is to practice self-awareness and empathy. Put yourself in your audience's shoes and consider the impact of your words and tone. Remember that what seems straightforward and easy to understand for you might be incredibly difficult for your audience to understand. And use inclusive language that respects your listeners and brings them along with you through the presentation. Focus on building a genuine connection and rapport with your audience, rather than trying to assert your superiority by showing that you know more than they do. If you're not sure how you're coming across, seek feedback from trusted colleagues or mentors and be open to adjusting your approach. Now that's the ivory tower mistake. Let's move on to mistake number 2. I had a chance a few years ago to see one of my favorite authors speak in person. Now, I was so excited for the event that I bought my tickets, made all the arrangements months in advance. And when the big day came, I was nervous to be in the same room with someone I held on such a high pedestal. Now, he entered the room, the lights went down, and the presentation began. And for the next 50 minutes, I tried hard to understand what he was talking about, but I couldn't. He used big words to sound smart and important, but he alienated me and most of the audience. And within a few minutes, the phones were out, scrolling was happening, and his impact was completely lost. Now, I knew the author, loved his books, but the way he spoke made him extremely unlikable. And I skipped the opportunity to meet him after the talk and went on my way, never to support his work again. Mistake number 2 is what I call the ostentatious orator mistake. And it happens when presenters use unnecessarily complex language, technical jargon, or obscure words in an attempt to appear more intelligent and more important. The number 1 reason why presenters make this mistake is the desire to impress the audience and showcase their expertise. They think that by using big words and complex language that they'll come across more credible and authoritative. But instead of impressing the audience, presenters who make this mistake are more likely to confuse and alienate them. And when the audience is constantly trying to understand the language used or follow convoluted explanations, they can't absorb the key messages that will connect with the presenter. So to avoid this mistake, use simple language. The simpler, the better. Here's an example of a sentence that uses big words. We will utilize a multifaceted, synergistic approach encompassing the integration of disparate data points and leveraging strategic partnerships. Whew, now that is a mouthful. Now here's the exact same message delivered with simple language that is easy to understand. We will use an approach that combines different types of information, and we will also take advantage of key partnerships. Do you see how easy the simple approach is to understand and how it compares to the first one that was more complicated and used big words and jargon? That's the difference between your audience understanding you and viewing you as likable and alienating you just like the author did to me. So that's the ostentatious orator mistake. Let's move on to mistake number 3. One of my clients was delivering a presentation to a group of other executives at their company. Now, the CEO was known for being extremely direct when giving feedback to the point where it usually felt like more of an attack than it was actual feedback. And as my client was delivering the presentation, the CEO interjected multiple times with very powerful critiques of my client's analysis. Now, each time the CEO spoke up, my client went into immediate protection and survival mode. My client met the CEO with the same energy and emotion that she was feeling. The harsh words were said and exchanged between the two of them. Mistakes were made, and the rest of the executive team felt like they had a front row seat to watching a train wreck in real time. Now, both my client and the CEO eventually apologized to each other for their behavior, but the damage was already done. Unfortunately, my client was the one who was labeled as more unlikable because the CEO was just doing what they always did. I call this mistake the fragile fortress mistake. And it happens when the presenter becomes defensive or combative with the audience. There will always be someone in the audience, no matter the size, who wants to prove they are smarter than you, the presenter. Now, this desire has nothing to do with you, but if you make this mistake, you'll be playing right into their hands. Instead, don't fight it. The fastest way to de-escalate an audience member in a heightened emotional state is to accept what they are saying. Tell them you appreciate their perspective and then move on. Now, if someone else thinks they are smarter than you, let them be smarter than you because you'll never prove them otherwise. And that's the fragile fortress mistake. Let's move on to mistake number 4. When I was in grad school, there was one class and one teacher I couldn't stand. From the very first class, the teacher was extremely unlikable. And this was a tenured professor at a great university. So my assumption going in was that he was credible and engaging, just like all the other professors in the program. But he did one thing that immediately turned me and the rest of my class off, and he did it in every single class. And even got so bad that the class got together and talked to the dean about how bad he was. And what he did might surprise you. Throughout each 3-hour lecture, he presented slides with an extensive amount of information and then proceeded to read every single line and every single word on each slide. It was as if he was a robot in front of the class just reading his lines. And we didn't know if he wrote his slides and it was his own words or if he picked up the curriculum for the class from somewhere else and then just delivered it. The conclusion my classmates and I came to in that first class was that he was extremely unlikable because of this behavior. And I call this the robot reader mistake. It happens when presenters read every word on their slides. It can be nerve-wracking to try to remember everything you want to say when presenting. However, if you put everything you need to say on the slide and then just read it, well, you'll lose your audience and you'll be extremely unlikable. And you become the least important part of the presentation since your words are already on the slide. So to avoid this mistake, keep the amount of text on your slides to the bare minimum. And you can always use the presenter notes section of your presentation tool to hold all the details of everything you want to say. Now this way, when you go into presenter mode and ready to present, you get to see the detailed notes on what to say, and your audience will see the bare minimum text on the slides. It's a win-win. And that's the robotic reader mistake. Let's move on to mistake number 5. This last mistake is most often overlooked, but has the biggest impact on your likability. Now, I'm going to present you a line in 2 different ways, and I want you to see if you notice the difference. Here's the first version. Your voice is a critical tool in what you communicate. Now, here's the second version. Your voice is a critical tool in what you communicate. Did you hear and feel the difference between these two deliveries of the exact same words? The first was flat, monotone, and had no emotion tied to it. And you probably thought it was a pretty bland statement as a result. In the second one, I leveraged my voice and emotion and tone to communicate my point. And did you feel and hear a difference between the two? I just demonstrated our fifth and final mistake, which I like to call the flat line faux pas mistake. Did you know that research has shown that 38% of what you communicate comes from your voice? 38%. Can you believe that? If a presenter's delivery is monotone, with little emotion or inflection, just like my first example, almost half of the communication will be lost. Presenters can fall into this mistake for any number of reasons, like they're nervous or anxious, they haven't prepared enough, they want to sound professional, they aren't comfortable with public speaking, they're too focused on the content and not the delivery. So if a presenter does not consciously prepare for and think about how they use their voice, there's a good chance they will speak with no emotion or inflection. So to overcome this mistake, you must practice playing with your voice. And here are 6 ways to do that. Use a variety of vocal tones and changes in pitch to add interest and emphasis to your words, just like I did in my second example and like I have throughout this video. Vary your pace and volume for emphasis. Use pauses strategically for the right impact. Connect emotionally with your content and refine and rehearse your delivery, not just your content. And most important of all, seek feedback and coaching to improve your vocal skills. So when you overcome the flatline faux pas, you will have a better chance of your audience liking you and connecting with you. Your content will be more memorable and impactful. You will demonstrate confidence, enthusiasm, and authority, and you will keep the audience engaged and attentive. You're going to increase your overall effectiveness as a presenter by doing all these things. Here are the 5 presenting mistakes that make you extremely unlikable. Number 1, the ivory tower mistake. Number 2, the ostentatious orator mistake. Number 3, the fragile fortress mistake. Number 4, the robotic reader mistake. And number 5, the flatline faux pas mistake. Avoid these mistakes with the recommendations that I shared, and you'll not only be more likable, but you'll also be set up to give extraordinary presentations that boost your visibility, amplify your expertise, and thrust your career to new heights. Hit subscribe and drop a comment below with the mistake that resonates most with you.